Hey everyone, this is Sean Bugg at the Back Half Podcast. Welcome. And we have a really special guest this week. Back in 2014, I had launched a pilot program for LGBTQ youth where we brought a small number of recent high school graduates to DC for a week so that they could meet with LGBTQ professionals from politics and media and the arts and law, pretty much drawing on this really deep well of experience in the DC LGBTQ community and hopefully giving our participants some connections and some ideas about all the things that they would be able to do with their lives as they were going forward. Probably one of the more transformative experiences of my life. And one of the great pleasures I've had in the 12 years since that program is watching the participants grow and move forward with their own careers, become adults, and achieve really cool things. One of the people who was one of our participants is Landyn Pan, who I remember, Landyn skipped their high school graduation ceremony to actually come to DC. I was really impressed with Landyn's forthrightness and confidence and willingness to speak what they believed. We had a really diverse group. We had ideological differences, we had cultural differences, we had all kinds of things. And it was just really amazing to see how everybody worked together. So like I said, I have followed Landyn for a while, and I've been really impressed with what they've accomplished and some of the new things that they've been getting into in their life. So welcome, Landyn. It's been a long time since we actually spoke. I'm really excited to hear from you. How are you doing today?
Yeah, I'm doing great. I'm really excited to sort of have this little reunion as well.
Awesome. One of the questions just personally I'm curious about is what was that period? You were like 18
Mhm.
when we met. You were just fresh out of high school. What was the first 1, 2, 3 years of experience? Because you were pretty newly out as trans as well. What were those first few years experience like for you?
In high school as a trans kid.
Yeah, starting there and then after
Yeah.
Next Gen, I think.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think I maybe had a little bit of a rare experience. I feel like I grew up in the Seattle area, so that area is already quite progressive in general. And I felt like when I came out, most of my friends were pretty accepting. So, I felt very lucky in that regard. And then Seattle had a lot of queer youth spaces and programs, stuff that I did. So, I remember one of the first things I joined that really changed me was this queer youth filmmaking week long day camp. The summer of after my freshman year, I think, no, was it? Well, I was 15, so it was like either summer after freshman year or like summer of sophomore year or something like that. And yeah, so it was really great because it put me in touch with a lot of different queer and trans youth from different schools around in the area, and I would hang out with them on the weekends and stuff like that, go to their houses. So yeah, and then I would also say that there was a trans family conference called Gender Odyssey that used to be in Seattle. I think now it travels around the country. I'm not sure if it's still around anymore, but I would go to that in the summer as well and meet people whose families were very accepting. So that was very cool to see. So, yeah, I was very lucky. I felt like that environment fostered my ability to really be myself and to be so confident, right? I think that if I didn't have that, maybe it wouldn't be the same way. In college was interesting. I went to college socially transitioned as male. So, some people didn't know I was trans. My friends and stuff did. I was very open about it. But that was a little bit of a different experience. I started to medically transition. This has been something I've been thinking about recently just because somebody else had talked about it on the internet, and this is something I talk about as well. It's that, when you start medically transitioning, I started taking testosterone. Your body, your voice, how you look, how people perceive you or treat you changes so much faster than like how you perceive yourself or, faster than you're able to process it. So, yeah, it was interesting, but it was good too. I didn't have any problems with being trans. I had a lot of queer and trans friends there as well. So all in all, I've always been around, community always been supported by it, which is a good thing.
Cool. That's awesome. I love hearing that. I love hearing that.
Yeah.
So you now. I want to get into a lot of stuff that happened during your 20s, but I also want to talk about where you are now because I think I hadn't even seen the profile of you in, the national magazine or anything when I reached out to you. I had just been following you online and
Yeah.
saw that you were working as a fitness coach. Definitely a fitness. I just found that fascinating for a number of reasons, and a lot of it from what you were saying from when I was following you. And I was just curious about at what point during your journey what was there an event or a thought that kind of put you on that path to saying, this is what I want to make my life about right now, both focusing on myself and focusing on other people.
I mean, I think that ever since I started medically transitioning, I had always wanted to get into fitness and build a different body for myself. I went to school in Southern California, and bodybuilding is really popular there, right? Just
Hmm.
because it's like it's all suns out, guns out in Southern California. So, all the guys at my college were like fraternity dudes. They were all pretty jacked, and I just didn't want to be like them, right? I had this association of like muscle makes you into this, this broy jock, misogynist type of person.
Yeah.
And so I had this mental block for a really long time. And I also saw that in the trans community too, that a lot of people were very into fitness, and I didn't like how that was the only thing that was celebrated. I felt like, there's many different ways to be trans, and I just didn't want to, I guess, quote unquote, conform, right?
Okay.
Still, I had tried fitness, didn't last in college just because I wasn't really prioritizing it. And a couple of years later, I got into fitness again just because I just didn't feel very healthy. It was like, I wasn't moving my body. I was, eating foods that didn't feel so great. So one day, me and my friend, we just kind of talked about that. It's like, we just don't feel healthy. Funny enough, her brother was a frat guy at the time. And he was like, you should do this workout plan. And we were like, okay, let's go to the gym together and do your brother's workout plan, right? And what I found from that was so much more than just the physical appearance. I just felt like I really connected with my body in a way that I didn't before. So I,
Mhm.
I made a lot of realizations and discoveries about myself. And so it was like, yes, there is that appearance part of it that over the years, after a couple of years, I just couldn't deny, right? It's like, I do want this for myself and I want to go for it. But then I found so much more than just the appearance aspect of it. Like I said, that connection with my body, loving strength in myself, building confidence and building routine and building stability through, going to the gym, showing up, doing something hard,
Mhm.
showing up sometimes when you don't want to, right? Giving yourself a schedule. I think that gives life structure. So it's just like I just found so many benefits through fitness and was just so in love with it. I felt like after a couple months of being consistent, I was like, I know that I want to have this in my life forever. So that's how I got into it personally. Then on the professional side, I was working in media for a couple of years. That's what I went to college for. And I think that working in media was very fun, but it just wasn't hitting it for me the way that I had always imagined. It was something that I wanted to do since I was like 12, but it just wasn't what I exactly imagined. I've always loved being in a community with other queer and trans people. I've always loved conversations with other queer and trans people. I've always loved, helping others. And so I got laid off in the pandemic, just like so many of my other friends did. And so I had a lot of free time. I took that time to be like, I think I want to get certified. I've kind of thought about it for the last year or two. Friends ask me questions about how to do things all the time. So took that time to get certified, trained a couple friends for free, started posting online, sort of had this vision of like, I want to help people in a more holistic way. I even saw that, you know, a lot of trans mass coaches at the time or coaches that were trans men at the time, it seemed like it was very appearance focused. And I get that it is, but I just wanted so much more than that. And I just felt like I didn't find like the type of coach that I would have wanted for myself. So that's how I got into it as a career.
Okay. How do you define that difference for you? Is there a way to specify a little bit what you're offering that you weren't seeing from other coaches?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think a lot of coaches are very physique based that I see, or that clients have come from other coaches before that will tell me that it's very like macros heavy. You're gonna do it no matter what. There's no excuses, right? And I think that you have to meet people where they're at. Of course, we do have clients that want to track every macro. They're very serious about the gym and their nutrition and building, the very specific physique that they want. But then there's also a lot of people that can get different benefits out of fitness, but they're not going to want to do that if it's so strict, right?
Yeah.
So for me, it's all about like helping people find like what's really sustainable for them, because it's going to be different for everybody. So that's, I think that's the key there, is like flexibility, also helping people understand like what it is that they like about fitness and how it is that they can relate to it so that they can stay with it. So it's just about helping people discover what their connection is to fitness, because I know that's different for everybody.
Okay. I was kind of curious. You've mentioned, you talked a little bit about how your body changed and other things when you went on testosterone. And I know that there's a lot of discourse out there these days about the use of testosterone among like cis women and this and that, which is probably like an entire other podcast conversation. But, there is this idea of how testosterone changes you both physically and in some ways, I hesitate to say mentally, but it can have different effects on you. Did you find that in a way? Did it change you beyond your body on the outside? Do you feel it changed you on the inside?
I feel like it's not that it changes you in itself, I think. I think that it changes your brain because I can only speak for myself. I think it changes your brain because it's like who you are as a combination of your natural personality and how other people receive you, right? So it's like you hear all the time from trans folks that, oh, when I was presenting or read as a woman, right, people didn't like my assertiveness. They would, say that I was bossy, or like, they would put it down, stuff like that. But then, after presenting as a man, then it's like, people take me more seriously. People, don't doubt you as much, stuff like that. So I think that like stuff like that culminates over time, and that changes how you walk in the world, how you do things, what you say. I definitely believe that, especially, for someone like me who's been on testosterone for 10, almost 11 years at this point, right?
Yeah.
And it'd be a different lived experience.
Another thing I was kind of curious about as well, and I think the trans community has really unique perspectives on gender and how we define it, classify ourselves, and things like that. There's a large window of what can comprise masculinity. I'm somebody who's kind of in the middle, I think, but I've had my aggressive moments and things like that. How do you kind of define masculinity, both for yourself and just when you're talking about masculinity in the world, how would you kind of define it?
Yeah, I mean, that's like a big question. That's like the big question of my life. I feel like, I think about this all the time and I go back and forth. It's like masculinity, this trait. It's like, well, anybody could have that, is masculinity this interest? Well, anybody could have that too, right? So I don't even know how to answer that. I feel like for me, it's just a vibe. I
Uh,
guess, it's like I do have many interests that are categorized as like maybe more typically masculine things or more things that guys like, quote unquote. But at the same time, it's like there's so many women and so many femmes that are also into those same things or have those same personality traits. So I think it's just whatever each person wants it to be.
I mean, that is a fair answer. Because
It's hard, it's very hard to answer that. What I
yeah,
feel like, what have you defined it as for yourself?
I probably have not put enough thought into it. I was raised, blue collar, rural area, farmers, that kind of thing. So I grew up around lots of very masculine stereotypes. And I kind of flitted back and forth with being a sissy boy and a sports boy, back and forth. So I kind of have always straddled the definition a little bit. But the older I get, I think the more quote unquote masculine I present. It sometimes feels like if I try to define it, then I'm closing off parts of myself, and that I'm also kind of negating other people's, femininity and things like that. I mean, it's just such a complex thing that I think we tend to box ourselves into a lot of shit that we shouldn't.
Yeah.
But yeah. Hey,
Yeah.
I don't have an answer. Otherwise, I wouldn't ask you.
These days I'm just like, yeah, anything goes. I think the closest answer I've come up with, and this is just based on like conversations that I've had with my clients, even when they talk about like, yeah, I want to embody a healthy masculinity. And I'm like, well, what does that mean for you? And they'll say something that I really like. A couple of them have said something that I really resonate with, and that's like using strength and privilege to help others. I feel like, yeah, I hear that and I'm like, yeah, I feel like that is a healthy masculinity, right? There is privilege to that. And it's like we should acknowledge that. And, using it to help others, yeah, that's the best way to go about it for sure.
No, I think that's actually a really great definition.
Yeah.
And I've been talking a lot about privilege lately with people, and you
Yeah.
know, those are fun conversations to have with white people in general. But
Mm.
adding it in with men as well, though, I do think it's important. What are some of the things you mentioned? What sort of feedback from clients? What are the things you hear from clients that make you the happiest for the work that you're doing these days?
There's so many different things. I think it's like it could be embodiment, it could be confidence, it could be any sort of like change that they feel like is really going to be something that lasts. I love to see people change their relationships, let's say with fitness or food or with how they view their body. And I think for me, the most rewarding thing is when it's time for clients to graduate, whether that's like, a year or two from the time we start working together or 6 months, seeing that we both feel confident in their ability to carry this on. I think that's that's the best, right? Because for like I said, for me, it's like fitness is supposed to be a lifelong thing. It's like it's good for your health, so we should be doing it anyway. Oh, if I'm 30 now and I want to be doing it for life, like who knows? That's like 50, 60 years, right? That relationship's going to change throughout time, but it's like I want to teach folks to be able to have that flexibility, that adaptability, understanding that, your routine's going to change, you're going to change, your priorities are going to change. Let that change, right? Discover what that is for yourself. The way that you've discovered it for yourself here, keep doing that throughout time as things change and keep finding ways to relate to it that feel relevant in the present moment that are going to keep that relationship positive and keep you going. Because what it is in your 20s, probably not going to be the same when you're in your 40s, right?
No, I can tell you for sure it's not.
Sure. So helping people kind of understand that from the get go, I think just sets them up for success and being able to kind of see that they're practicing that. That's just really awesome.
Have you just curious, have you worked with any clients who are on the older side? Or are you primarily focusing on people around your own age?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I like the idea of aging with my clients. So we get a big range, honestly. My minimum age is 24. So we have lots of folks in their mid 20s. We do have people in their 40s and 50s and stuff like that as well. And yeah, I like it all. I like it all.
Cool. You'd mentioned you talked a little bit about how people um, kind of hate the word pass, but the people
Yeah.
assume that you're male when they
Yeah.
meet you.
Yeah.
But I'm still kind of curious, gym culture has kind of a meathead reputation. How comfortable do you feel? I'm assuming you feel very comfortable, but are there challenges to navigating that space as a trans person?
Definitely, definitely there is, I mean, these days I'm like, yeah, I'm a meathead, I'm a jock. I say just embrace it, right? And I find that some clients really like that as well. Like it feels like something that's not accessible to them or to us. And it's like, I'm like, hey, if you want to feel that way, lean into it. It's like that can be like your own definition, right? Um, for me, it's like I do get nervous sometimes to tell people that I'm trans. I usually I don't feel like it's necessary in every interaction, of course, but once I get to know people, I like for them to know who I really am, right? So I did have this one experience in the gym where, like, it was a bodybuilding gym. It was very intimidating, and I needed some help with like working out again after an injury. So I ended up hiring like a trainer there, and he was like the biggest man I've ever seen in my life. And he told me he's been on steroids since he was like 18. That's like that. So it's been like 20 years. So he's like huge, like competitive bodybuilder. Most people probably look at him, feel like that's like really scary, right? But he actually was like the nicest guy. And the more we started training, like the more I would like be more open and stuff like that. And I did have this sticker on my phone that was like a really jacked Hello Kitty. And so he was like he was like, nice sticker on your phone case, basically. And I forget how it kind of like evolved into this, but yeah, then we started talking about like queer things, and he started like talking about how he used to live in the queer neighborhood in Seattle, and that all of his clients used to be gay. And then he was like, he was like, well, after this conversation, can I, maybe guess that you're also? And then I was like, yeah, I'm trans. I'm not a gay guy. And then he was like, oh, like, then people always are like, oh, I would have never known, whatever. They don't really know what to say.
Yeah.
Then, we started talking a little bit more, and he was like, so you're taking testosterone? And I'm like, yeah. And he's like, me too. Right. That was like when he talked about taking steroids, and I was like, oh yeah, like my testosterone levels are like 600. I think the typical male level is 300 to 1000. And he was like, yeah, mine are 3000. And I was like, okay. So it was just like a very like funny conversation to me. And that's just gonna stick with me for a long time, because it's like it's just so silly and goofy to be like, oh, like I'm trans, I'm on testosterone, and for him to be like, me too,
Yeah. Hey,
and it's like, so's every guy at this gym, I guess, because it was a bodybuilding gym and everyone's competing.
yeah. Finding commonality is a great thing, no matter where it comes from sometimes.
Yeah, so it was very funny, and it's like he's this big scary dude, but then it's like, once you get up close, it's like, oh, you have kind eyes, actually.
I was looking through some pictures. It looks like you are really involved with some sports and things like that, right? Are you a sporty person now? Are you playing things, or are you pretty much focused on bodybuilding?
Yeah, so I've never competed in bodybuilding, so I'd say like I don't really identify as like a bodybuilder per se, but
Okay.
it's like bodybuilding technically is like just like the act of building muscle is bodybuilding, right? But I think when people talk about like, oh, I bodybuild, or I am a bodybuilder, like I always think like, oh, they're in competition. So yeah, so it's like I do, I've done tons of bodybuilder style workouts and stuff like that, but I've never competed. Don't really have interest in that. These days I am leaning more toward becoming sportier. I never really was that good at ball sports, but I started jujitsu this year. Really love it so far. I find that, for the last like 7 years or so, it's like I've just kind of been lifting weights. Doing mostly bodybuilding style workouts to try to build as much muscle, aesthetically as I can. Last year, or like end of 2024, I kind of felt like, okay, cool. I feel like I'm really in a good spot, right? It was like for all those years, like every time I was just like, I just want more. Of course, I still want more, but like I think I'm pretty good now. So I'm pretty satisfied now. So then it kind of became like, what else is there for me, right? I'm a little bit bored of the traditional lifting that I've been doing for the last 7 years, and so yeah, jujitsu has been great. I do lift at a much lower volume than before now, because it's like you have to also factor in the other activity that you're getting. But this is now making me think about more stuff like mobility, more cardio conditioning. So yeah, it's good. It's good stuff. I have done Spartan races. I did have a year where I was really, really into that. Did a couple with my clients, traveled to like down to LA, back to New York for it, stuff like that. That got me into running for a little bit. So yeah, so I feel like I was exploring for a little bit, because I just kind of knew it's like I can't live like this forever, right? Like
Yeah.
I said, it's gotta evolve, it's gotta stay fresh, so you stay engaged in it.
Cool. One thing I did want to ask you about, actually, there's still a few things I want to ask you about.
Yeah.
Since you're on you're transmasculine, people read you as male. Do you feel, a lot of the political culture in America right now around trans issues tends to really focus, or at least from an outside perspective, tends to focus on
Yeah.
trans women in sports, and this and that and everything else. How do you feel these conversations and these political attacks and trans panic? How is that kind of affecting you as a transmasculine person?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, for me, it's like I have a lot of safety in my cis passing privilege, right? And I, get the choice to disclose. The politics these days, I guess when you first transition, that's all you think about. At least I could say that's true for a lot of people, to be honest. But yeah, that's definitely true for me. It's like it's something that you are thinking about all the time, right? What do I have to do to be read the way that I want? Or like, how do I get access to these things? For a couple of years, that was all I was focused on: getting T, getting top surgery, changing all of the legal government documents. And then after that, after all of that was done for me, it felt like the rest of my life was beginning. And, I kind of forget that I am trans sometimes. It's like yes and no, right? It's like I'm around community all the time. It's like all of my friends are queer and trans. All of my clients are too. So it's like both in work and personal life, that is all that I'm around. And I think maybe that's part of it too. It's like, oh yeah, like being trans is just like the default, right? Or being queer is just the default when that's like
Yeah.
who you're around all the time. So it's like I almost forget that it's like I'm very different than other people sometimes. And I feel like this administration makes me think about that. That it's like, oh, I am. I have to be reminded that I am different. And that sucks.
Yeah.
But, you know, I think it's just taking it a step at a time, continuing to do everything that I am doing and continuing to live life and be in community with other queer and trans people, because it's like, we're all here still doing the same things as always. So there's that. One thing that I find interesting too is that a lot of trans masc and trans men will talk about how like they feel like trans masc representation is not as like frequent as it is for trans women. But I feel like what's missing from that conversation is like when there's more like representation, there's also more scrutiny, right?
Yep.
As someone who's been in the trans community, who has not had like issue finding community, I've just always felt like, it's always felt like to me, I've always seen more trans masc people online. It's always been easier to find more trans masc people. For my trans femme friends, I haven't always heard that. It doesn't really seem like as many trans women are out online. I'm not exactly sure. And so I think a lot of the conversations when people bring that up, there's not enough representation. They're talking about TV, media, but when we look at the media, a lot of it is scrutiny. So it's like,
Yeah.
we can't talk about, oh, I want more representation without also talking about like, are you ready for that scrutiny that,
I
that
mean,
that honestly compromises safety a lot of times too.
yeah. I mean, I follow quite a few trans women through social media and stuff, and they go through some really hellish stuff sometimes because,
Yeah.
they're trying to be out and open and talk about issues that are important, but people are just, I don't know if I would be able to take that kind of level. And I can see why people would choose to disengage from that.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think that trans women definitely face a lot worse things than trans masculine people, and that's always been true historically, I think. I mean, that's always true for like, even women that present more masculinely, right? They've always had more acceptance than men that present femininely. It's just
Right.
misogyny at work. So it's always been tougher for trans women and trans femmes. And I'm not sure if trans masks acknowledge that enough.
Well, I think it can be really uncomfortable to, address privilege like that. I mean, even, I'm a cis gay man,
Mm,
but, as you say, there's a lot of misogyny. So very feminine gay men have always been kind of looked down on in a way, and they've always been the clowns and this and that through
yeah.
media and stuff. But I was going to say, I'm actually kind of jealous of you because, now that I'm, this is the kind of theme of the podcast and the newsletter, the back half is I'm on the back half of my life because I'm past the halfway point. That's no surprise to anybody.
Mm,
But, I don't, I used to be pretty much exclusively in gay and lesbian and bisexual places. I've worked as, like I used to call it, pro homo for like most of my life up until I was, in my mid 40s. So for the past few years, I've actually been working in, non gay spaces. And it's just been such a different thing. And I kind of miss it.
yeah.
I miss that community. I mean, I've learned a lot, particularly because I'm in a primarily, female dominated
Yeah.
space now. So I'm learning a lot there. But yeah,
Yeah.
I miss it. So I'm a little jealous of you for that.
For sure. I feel blessed, honestly. I really do. Like, it's really awesome. And I think about that all the time. I don't take it for granted.
Yeah. So one thing I I was also curious about, and you mentioned, that you had gone into media, and when you were younger, you were doing some really cool art stuff while you were in college and afterwards, that I was always really impressed with. Is that something that's still a part of your life? Is that something that maybe is on hold while you focus on other things? How is that part of yourself expressing itself?
People ask me this all the time. Unfortunately, yeah, I would say it is on hold. It's hard to get back into the arts because I did it at such a high level, in my opinion, and so it's like anything that I do now, it's like it's it's like hard because it's like I feel like I can't top that. And it's difficult for me to like bring myself there, which is very interesting because it's like some of my clients are former like competitive athletes, right? They'll say like they were super competitive, very serious in college, and now it's been 10 years since they've done that. And they have a hard time with working out because they are thinking about, I want to go hard like I did when I was 20, but now my body's different, my schedule's different. You don't have something that holds you to working out 3 hours a day, 6 days a week anymore. And it's just like I just see that parallel, right? It's a mental block because it's like it's hard for me not to compare myself to that level that I was at before. But I'm not
Mm.
sure if I'm gonna be able to top that again because I did that in New York, collaborating with all sorts of people, makeup artists, stylists, really creative, eccentric folks who were models. And I just live in a different place now. I don't have access to those same things, and it makes me a little bit sad, right? Because it's like I think about if I wanna do creativity, I wanna do it to that level. People talk
Right.
about, like, maybe you could explore creativity in a different way, maybe a different type of art.
Hmm.
And there's parallel to fitness for that too, right? Let's say like someone does powerlifting, you're lifting super, super heavy. Now they're like, I got all these joint injuries. And it's like, okay, well, instead of lifting barbells that are going to remind you of the past, let's find a totally different modality of fitness or of lifting, right? And build a
Right.
new association. So people tell me about that too. And I've thought about it, but it's like my business takes a lot of time and energy. And I do feel creatively fulfilled from doing it. So I think that's the thing, right? It is very creative in many different ways. And so I almost don't feel the need to have a creative outlet because I feel like I actually do have that right now through my business. Now, that could change in a few years, right?
Hmm.
I could crave or desire a creative outlet more later on. But right now, yeah, right now I feel fulfilled creatively.
Good. Well, I mean, I get what you're saying about feeling like you don't want to do it unless, you can do it at the same level or better,
Yeah.
because I walked away from my writing and editing career.
Yeah.
That's been, boy, 15 years, I think, since I walked away from it. And there were a
Yeah.
lot of things that it was like, do I want to do this because I'm not going to be at that level anymore?
Yeah.
And once you hit a certain age, it's technically harder to start things new.
Right.
But I also, after a certain amount of time, like I said, I just started missing it.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm here today. That's
Yeah.
part of it because I miss talking to people and finding out about people.
Yeah.
And I found that over the past year or so that a lot of my creative writing and things like that has actually come back because I think I gave myself the mental space to say I don't have to be what I used to be. I can be something different. Or if I do it and it's not quite at the same level as it was, it's okay because
Yeah.
I'm older now and everything's going to be, it's all about finding new experiences no matter how old you are. That's kind of
Yeah. I
my philosophy
yeah.
now.
I do think so too. It's just like, when I did photography, it really helped me connect with other people in like a different way, people that maybe I would have never met. I do feel like that through fitness too. It's like I am connecting with people that I wouldn't have met otherwise as well. So it's interesting because it's like fulfills me in very similar ways that I didn't expect. And I also feel like I also did photography for so long. I did it since I was like 14 maybe.
Hmm.
Went through so many different phases with photography, and I feel like I really got my fill of that. It was like my sort of childhood desires. I think that I I think that I did fulfill them, and that's what made me so comfortable in switching was because it was like I felt like, yeah, I did a lot of the things that I have always wanted to do. And so it felt like a comfortable sort of close to that chapter. Do I feel sad about it? Yeah. I feel like some other people do as well, right? People will tell me they miss my photography, and I'm like, I miss it too. I feel like I loved that era of my life. It was amazing. It was incredible, and liked the stuff that I produced. And I felt like I did really challenge myself. Could I have gone more? Yeah, definitely. Just like I say with like muscle, can I be bigger? Always, for sure. But no, I feel good with where it went, how things played out, and like you said, life is long. There's always going to be other opportunities to get back in to tap into that creative outlet again. I just
And it
don't know
might
what.
be, yeah,
Yeah,
it might be something completely different. I mean, you
it
just
could
never
be
know where you're going to be in 20 years.
exactly. It could be something completely different. So we'll see.
Yeah,
I
well,
kind of like to let things naturally come.
yeah. Well, the good thing is if people are telling you that they miss it, that means you made an impression on them. And in a
Yeah,
lot of ways, the work that you did will always be your work and you'll always have it.
yeah.
So I was curious now that you're 30 now, right? Okay. So if I were, if you as a 30-year-old were invited to be one of our accomplished speakers at the Next Gen Foundation, the leadership camp back in 2014, what would be the thing that you would tell yourself and the other participants?
Yeah, that's a good one. I mean, I would say like if you there's so many things that I would say. I would say like don't be afraid to like walk off the what was that saying? Like walk off the beaten path or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I would say that because I do feel like a lot of college was like it's like okay, yeah, you go to school, you get a job here, you kind of climb the ladder, and I just didn't really feel like that was for me. I just kind of always felt like, well, if I want to have a different life than other people, it's like you have to take different actions, right? So it's like just don't be afraid to like explore things that maybe feel like outside of the box for you, or like maybe you didn't get a lot of examples of that. So that's what I would say. Just
Okay.
explore more. Yeah.
Yeah. Don't just go with the birth, school, work, death path. Actually, try to take a little bit
Yeah.
more adventurous.
Yeah, absolutely. I just felt like that sort of mentality, like not, it didn't really stifle me, but it just made me scared of like other stuff. But I kind of noticed in retrospect, it was like, yeah, I did attend a lot of panels, career development things, programs, scholarships would send us places. And, there were people that were vice presidents at places. And then there were people that, had their own businesses or freelancers. And I always felt like I gravitated toward the latter a lot more. And now in hindsight, I get why, right? It's just like, I just felt like a lot of the actual beaten path is just designed in a way that I could be successful in, but I don't think that I could be as successful as I am right now with being able to kind of design my own schedule and pace and like path and stuff like that. So I think it's just making sure that younger people understand that it's like you don't have to follow what everybody else does, and things feel like they don't make sense when you decide on them, but if you trust yourself, a lot of times it does make sense, right? I think
Yeah.
about like, oh, fitness is like so different than photography or working in media, but then as we were talking about, it's like there's actually so many parallels. So it's like all of the things that I learned from being a photographer, from interacting with people through there, I carry over into this career now. So things that don't make sense, they actually do
Yeah.
usually. Yeah.
And I think that's a really good insight. I mean, I was supposed to be a big Capitol Hill political reporter or something like that straight out of college, and I fucking hated it. Like the very first job I had, I think the best thing I ever did was to leave it behind, become an AIDS activist, go into public health, and kind of walk away from journalism for like almost 10 years,
Yeah.
and focus on creative writing and, just doing something different. Now I've worked for myself for 26 years. I think working for other people just sucks.
Yeah.
It's much more fun to work for yourself.
Yeah. I
So
agree with that.
so where I know that not everybody listening is going to be from Seattle, but for people in Seattle in particular, where can they find you if they wanted to get in touch with you about your services as a fitness coach?
Yeah, so I mean, I coach online, so
Awesome.
I am on Instagram at FitLandyn, so that's Landyn. I spell my name with a Y, and then also my website, so LandynPanFitness.com. I think you could just Google me as well. You'll find my website there too.
So just real quick, is there anything that we haven't talked about that you had hoped that you would get a chance to talk about?
I guess like another thing I wanted to add to like what I would say to like the 18-year-olds now or like my 18-year-old self. One of the best pieces of advice that I got when I was in college from a professional panel was don't be tied to job titles, but like more so think about like what are the experiences that you want to have, what's the impact that you want to have, right? I think that that is probably one of the biggest takeaways that I've had, and I've definitely kept that to heart in like everything with my work. It's like you can think about that in terms of when I was doing media, it was like my desire was to connect with people, to help people. And so when I felt like what I was doing wasn't necessarily as impactful as I had hoped anymore, right? I gravitated towards something else that aligned with those values. And I feel like that really helps. It's like, when we're so fixated on titles, I have to achieve this, I have to achieve that, you can end up getting stuck in things that don't serve you anymore. And then,
Hmm.
one thing for me was like I felt like it was hard to walk away from that because I felt like, oh, this is what I always wanted to do. I had already invested so much time in that. But then I chose to look at it as like, you had really great experiences already. You checked off a lot of boxes of what you wanted to do. It's like, do you want to think of it as, I don't want to have wasted all this time before, or do you want to just take it as like that what actually was not a waste of time? That actually was great. But it's like I don't want to keep wasting my time being in something that I don't want to do anymore.
Right.
So
That's great. Well, thank you so much for being here. It is so great to see you again. Like I said, it's been a long time. It's been so amazing to watch you grow and be successful, and do a number of different things and blaze your own path. So, congratulations. And I hope it just keeps growing in the future.
yeah,
I'll put some links in the description so everybody out there can reach out to you. And for everybody who's been listening or watching, thank you for joining us at the back half. I look forward to seeing you again soon.